Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new, my name is Emmanuel, and what we do over here is we simply learn some awesome iOS stuff. We also try to build apps that you probably will relate to. So currently we are building the backend to our amazing food ordering app. So feel free to subscribe because I'm sure you're gonna like it here, and let's get to it. So in the last video we created our first function. Today we're gonna go one step further and we're gonna use our URL request that we created from the previous video, and we're gonna make an actual request, the backend. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get rid of all of these trashy stuff that I added over here. Okay, I'm gonna head back to our networking service. Let's close this, and I'm gonna make this private. All right, so it's very important. I don't want to expose that. All right, so let's close this. Good. Now the next function we want to create or we want to implement is just as we explained in our introduction video. This function is going to make the request. So again, we're going to create a private function, and this we're going to call requests. All right. Now, request is going to take a couple of parameters, right? The first one is the route. We see it again. So the route simply says or tells us where we should make the request to, all right? Secondly, we want the method, which of course, as we said in the last video, tells us the type of request we want to make. Then we have parameters, param. So string any, this is going to be optional and can be nil. Then we're going to have type as well. Now type is going to be a generic. So I actually have a video talking about generics. So if you don't really understand the concept, or even if you do, then you can just take a second or a minute or 5 or 10 and just head over to the video and sort of refresh your memory on how generics work. Okay, so what we want to do over here is whenever we call the request function, we want to pass in a particular type that request or the response from the request should be automatically decoded to. All right, so let's say I make a request to fetch all books. So while I'm making the request, I want to tell my network service that when you get a response, automatically decode the JSON response into this particular structure. So the structure in our case is going to be like a book structure. So whenever you get a response from the backend, automatically decode the book, the JSON, into the Swift book object. All right. So and because we're going to be making multiple requests using this single function, it makes sense for us to have that as a generics, right? So that we can decode into multiple types. Okay. So we're going to specify this as t.type. All right. And the last thing we're going to do is to add a completion. Now the completion is whenever we receive a response and we're done decoding, we want to call our closure, right? The closure is just gonna tell the function that called it that I'm done. Take your response, all right? So this completion is just gonna be a way for us to inform our caller that we're done with the request, all right? So the completion is going to send back rather a result that has the T and the error. So this is going to return the generics and the error. And finally, after this, this is going to return void. Awesome, this has been a lot of information. And actually, so now you see that it doesn't know what T is. So we need to specify that. So right over here, we're gonna do the less than and greater than, and then we're gonna put capital T and say that T is going to be of type codable. All right. So this simply means that T is anything that can be encoded or decoded. And since we're actually doing just decoding, you can go ahead and just write decodable over here. But if for whatever reason you want to also encode your data, then it makes sense for you to just use codable, right? So we have our function setup, or the function definition instead. So let's just go ahead and move all of these to new lines, just so that we keep things a little bit cleaner. Completion. All right. Now, right in here, we want to make a request to the backend. Now, the first thing we're going to do, and remember, we need our URL sessions. So in case you don't know how the URL sessions work, then I also have a video about URL sessions data task, and I believe it's a very good place to start. It's just going to teach you how to make a basic request to backend. All right. But before we actually get to that, the first thing we need is our URL request, which is what we worked on in the last video. So what I'm going to do is say let our request, or URL request, let's call it request, be equal to, so we have a function called create request. So I click that, and route is of course whatever we pass in while calling this particular function. The method again is going to be whatever we pass in. The parameters is of course going to be whatever we pass in, okay? And this is going to do all of the magic, and it's going to return a URL request if there is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a guard statement over here and say else like this, and simply I want to return. So if for whatever reason there is no URL request, we just want to break, right? Another thing you can do, which is actually good practice, is you could just right over here, you could create or use your completion and then create a failure and say something. So we're just going to use an error, but I'm not going to do this just yet. Maybe in the next video, we're going to create our custom error string. Okay, so but basically what you want to do is, rather than just returning and then nothing happening, you can just return an error so that you can display that error in your actual UI. All right, so for now I'm just going to leave this as return. Okay, now we have our URL request, and actually, come to think of it, let me just do that real quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a new Swift file, which I'm going to call app error. Okay, and this app error is going to be of type enum, or it's going to be an enum rather, and app error. This is going to conform to localized error, and over here we're going to just specify the different types of errors that we want to have in our app. Okay, so one that we may have is error decoding. So in case the decoding went wrong, and we're going to see this in the next video, but in case while trying to decode our response something went wrong, then we just want to use this error. The next one we want to have is unknown. So this is like the worst case. So we don't know what happened, but something happened, right? Then we want to have invalid URL. Then finally we want to have our server error, and this is going to take a string. So this is whatever error was passed in from the backend. All right, so after this, what we want to do is we want to implement an error description like this, where we will switch self, and we're going to switch self to return errors or strings to all of these error types. Okay, so for error decoding, we want to say response could not be decoded. For the unknown error, let's say, bruh, I have no idea what go on. All right, so for invalid URL, we're just gonna blame this on the user. What you doing, man? So we just write over here, bruv, or hey, shout at him, give me a valid URL. And for the server error, so this is when the server tells us what happened. So just have this as error, and we're gonna return whatever was passed in. All right, perfect. So now we have our error, our app error. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna head back over here, and let me just quickly undo or redo like this. And in this error, I could, so I'm gonna call completion. I could say that the URL was bad, right? So maybe there was something wrong with creating the URL. I could say I don't know, right? So it completely depends on you. So you just put your app error instead, and you just call whatever type that you want to specify. Okay, so let's say I want to specify, let me use unknown. So I don't know exactly why it failed, but well, it did fail. So this makes more sense, so that the user isn't just left with a loader, but they can actually see what happened. So now we have our request, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to generate our URL session. Okay, so to do that, we're going to say URL session dot shared dot data task with request. So this, we already have access to our request. So what are we going to do next? We're going to add our closure. Yeah. And this is going to take 3 parameters. The first one is the data, then the second is the response, and finally we have the error. All right. Now always remember to call resume. Okay. And actually I have all of these explained in the video, so I'm going to leave a link. Remember, if you have any kind of confusions, then you can always check back on the video or ask questions in the comment section if you will. All right. So at this point, we have actually made the request, right? And we've gotten a response. So want to check whether or not there's data or there was an error, and then we will do some other thing. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to create a result variable, and this variable is going to be of type result, and it's going to take in data or error. Okay, and this is going to be optional. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to say if let data be equal to data. So let's say this was successful, and there's actually data in the response. So what we want to do first of all is want to say results should be equal to dot success, and the data is going to be data, right? Now, in order to simply print out the data for us to see the response, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let response string be equal to string and say data, I think, and here we're going to pass in the data. All right, so this is going to convert, let me see, did I miss something? All right, the encoding. So this is going to be .utf8. All right, so this is going to convert our data to string like this and return an optional string. So otherwise we just say could not stringify our data. Awesome. So at this point we're just going to print the response is, put this in the next line and say response like this, response string. What did I miss? 1. Okay, so this is going to get our response. It's going to get the data and add it as a success to our result. Then it's going to just convert the data to string and then print so that we can see. Now, else if there was an error, so if let error equals error, then what we want to do is want to say results equals dot failure. So this one failed, and we're simply going to pass in error. We can still go ahead and print that the error is, and say error dot localize description. All right, so that's that. Now at this point we have access to our result. So what we want to do, and this is very important, because remember, whenever we do this, we are sort of executing this outside of the main thread, right? Not sort of, we're actually doing that. So if we were to make any changes, if we were to do like a return and make any changes to the UI, then we're going to cause some messed up issues, right? So we need to remember to jump back. So I'm going to say dispatch queue. So we're trying to get back to our main thread. So dispatch queue.main.async, all right? And we can just go ahead and say weak self, or we don't need to do that, because why? This is a struct over here. But if it were a class, then you want to make sure that if at all, you're going to be referencing you're going to be creating any kind of strong reference, then you want to make, you're going to want to reference it in a weak way. If that makes sense. But anyhow, I have a video explaining concurrency, so I'm going to leave a link to that as well, just so that you can, get a refresher. So at this point, we have access to our result. So the next thing we want to do is we want to, at this point, we want to decode our response and then send the data, the decoded data, back to the user. So I'm going to add that as a to-do over here. So decode our results and send back to the user. And this is where we're going to take off in our next video. Well, before then, we want to make sure that this function actually works. So we want to make sure that it makes a request to the backend, and then it sends us a response. So what are we going to do? I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a singleton, right? And this is a design pattern that just allows us to have one instance of a class or a struct, and then we use that single instance to access the properties of that class or structure. All right, so to do that is very simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say static let, and I'm going to call mine shared. This is going to be equal to network service. Okay, and after doing this, the next thing I want to do is I want to make the init private, just so that you cannot create an instance of this function outside of this place. So to do that, I'm just going to say private init, just like that. Just like that, very simple. Now, what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to create a function which is going to sort of simulate our first request. So I'm going to say func my first request, and for now I'm not going to care about these parts. All I want to do is call our request. All right, so what I'm going to do here is say request, and the route I want to call is the temp. The method is going to be get, and the type, just for now, what I'm going to specify is string. It doesn't make any sense. It's not going to have any effect now, because you see we didn't make use of the type anywhere in this function. All right. Now remember, when you do string, you're going to have to add .self. Oh, my battery's low. Gonna have to plug this. So finally, we're gonna need to specify the completion. So when this function is done executing, what do we want to do? So I'm just gonna do like this, or well, we can just say print. No. Let's not do this, because I didn't call the completion anywhere here. All right. So I'm just gonna leave that as a. Can I do this? Can I? No. What's in my mind? What's in my mind? No. Does this work? No, it did not. Oh, so I had to add this for in. Anyhow, what I'm just trying to do is create an empty type of this, right? So, yeah. Now, so when this function is called, this is going to use the request to make a network request, right? So when we do this, we expect to either see the response or the error, right? So now let's actually call this, and we're going to be calling this from our home view controller over here, and this is how we call it. So we're going to say network service dot shared dot my first request. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an actual request that points to a path in our backend. So let's head over to our network service and get into our temp. And this, I'm going to change to dish categories. So now that we have that connected, let's go ahead and run this, and hopefully we get a response. If we do, then awesome, perfect. So yeah, this is so nice. So you see over here, we got our actual request. So the response is, why did it move is to the next line? Was that what we did? Was that what we did? Oh, yeah, this is what we wanted to do. So, but you can see that we got a status of 200. We got the message as success. Then we got our data as the actual data that we want to display in our app. So what we're going to be doing in the next video is we're going to decode this response directly into a Swift class. All right. So see you guys in the next video. I hope this session has been enlightening or insightful. Okay, so if it has, then go ahead, hit the thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe. There's more awesome stuff coming your way. All right, see you guys in the next video.